Hello, Mateu.
Hello, how are you doing?
We agreed to discuss together five different issues. First, the social impacts of coronavirus on the behaviors and values of people. Uh, then we will move to the technological impacts on transport and communication technologies. Then, how these technological changes are going to influence people behavior, people values. Then we will go to European transport policy, a subject that Mateo has been working for many, many years after his book Going Trans-European from 1999. And then we will close with the conclusions of all of these in relation to transport project evaluation. So we have an interesting menu of issues for today. So Mateo, let's begin. Let's begin by asking you, uh, I know that you believe that we are still framed by the mindsets of the last decades of the 20th century in transport planning, in transport project evaluation and financing. Now, do you think that the pandemic has confronted all of us, let's say transport sector specialists, engineers, economists, geographers, environmentalists, with the hard reality of the obsolescence, and it's a hard word, obsolescence of our mindsets? We need to rethink all over again.
Yeah, I think so. Listen, first of all, I wanted to thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak with a lot of our colleagues around the world who are connected to our interview. I think this is a good opportunity to share some ideas that have been developing in particular over the last year or the last year and a half, but ideas that were already there for a long time. And maybe the pandemic has given us the opportunity to realize them in another way. Yeah? So I think that this point of having a kind of obsolete mindset to deal with transport problems, to understand the transport system and to see how we could actually go about to design a better system for the future is now, this idea of obsolescence has to be adopted by all of us. Why do I say so? Because actually digitization has represented a radical change in our ways of life. And it will be even more dramatic in the next few years. And we have not integrated these changes in our system. I think that the pandemic has been, in this sense, a good opportunity to see both the potential of the information society, but also the difficulties that they represent for our society. We have lived through this famous black swan. So suddenly a complete, an unexpected break. It's in the last elements of our statistical distribution. And this has put on the table some of the problems of our system, and I think we have to change a lot our focus on many transport issues. In any case, what is clear is because of this black swan, a lot of these forecasting methods that we had, that were really trends that were following economic growth, essentially. So we're saying that personal mobility and freight mobility were responding essentially to economic growth, and they are stable and they will go on forever. So when we were doing forecasts for 30, 40 years, we're looking at those, they are unreliable. And then they are big blips, big situations, and so on. So we have to understand that. That's one of the things. Another point related to that, which is, I would say, transcends in a way, goes beyond the transport system, is the impact of this COVID on this right to mobility. This right to mobility, which is included even in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, is Article 13, that says that people have to have freedom of movement and residence within the borders of each state. Okay, we say that each state, but we have seen that suddenly this right to move has been curtailed, has been stopped in a very dramatic way, probably without technical and fundamental reasons, but simply following a kind of a bureaucratic process. And we see that this is part of a trend going on in the world in many countries, including Spain, I would say, to reduce the rights of people. So we wonder if this this experience in public administrations having the capacity to restrict rights, people rights in such a way, in particular this right to mobility, which will be related very soon with biometrics and the capacity to identify people. So this type of information, this type of prevention of doing things and so on, it is going to be something that we have to accept or not. That's it's a tremendous limitation, and we have to discuss these things. So it's quite an interesting subject that has appeared in with this pandemic, with all the importance it has for the future of the humanity in a way. So we were very convinced that we were going in a path towards more rights, and now suddenly we find that we probably are not.
Okay, Mateu, and then let's discuss maybe some more concrete aspects on the impacts of the pandemics on transport demand, beginning by e-commerce, telecommunications, and see the different segments of mobility, in which sense they have changed after the pandemics, or because the pandemics.
I think there are several points. One is very important to me is the globalization aspect of transport. So we have assisted in the past decades to this important phenomenon. In particular to how the industry has moved towards Asia and so on, and these enormous flows of containers back and forth and so on. So this has been dramatic. We could discuss that for a long time. But then suddenly in the past few years, especially due to the Trump administration, bizarre behavior with other countries, we were doubtful that this would continue. I think this is a very complex phenomenon, but I think the pandemic has shown that we cannot live alone. We need, all the countries need the others, and so on and so on. So it's going to continue, probably with requiring more resilience. So we have to have more suppliers all over the world, distribute a little bit better, but the best performers have to take the lead in many things. And this is in this sense, the pandemic being a universal thing, we also have to look at what's happening or what will happen in other regions of the world. I am thinking of Africa, Latin America. Are they going to stay away of this economic growth phenomenon or not, and so on? So this is, I think the globalization has to be revised again, and this affects, of course, transport in a very substantial way. Then we have this another phenomenon in part related to this, which is the e-commerce phenomenon. Which again is linked very much to this globalization. But it will have some important aspects in mobility. So they will probably reduce some time of transport. On the other hand, we are observing in our cities how this, the proliferation of vans and other types of vehicles are creating a lot of trouble. So traffic management will have to be rephrased, changed in the next few years to see how can we cope with this phenomenon, and in a way how can we make these trips, this travel, pay for for the service provided. It's I think it's absolutely ridiculous that we get all this free shipping from so many suppliers. It doesn't make sense to me. We have to be aware that transport has a cost. Of course it is included in the price or whatever, but it's not fair. It's not fair to have free shipping, I think. It's but this is, this is the type of things that will have to change in the future.
Mateu, let me read a question of a listener, which is very much related to what you are saying. He says, I wonder about the future of the car in urban areas. COVID-19 has increased health values in our cities. I know you have been working on this issue. What about the growth in the number of cars? Is the autonomous electric car a greening operation of the car industry? What will happen? So the cities of the 20th centuries were the cities of cars. We are moving to the cities of mobile phones. So what?
No, I don't think so. But no, we are going to discuss this a bit later also. But what is the impact of the pandemic in our ways of lives have been enormous. No, so and we can see that in how the travel demand has changed, and it will change in the future. So we are now in a we have gone down with in urban transport demands, particularly in public transport and so on, and we are now in the phase of recovering this demand, but it's going to be quite different. I think so. I mentioned the e-commerce still, so factor. It will probably have also an impact in some types of trips. Trips that people like to go shopping, but not all the shopping. So it's going to be probably reduced. I don't know. But the most important factor is going to be teleworking. So there are some experts who believe that the teleworking is going to change completely. How people move and so on and so on. I am not so convinced. I think that is what the effects are going to be more in terms of flexibility. So people do not want to work all the time at home. They like to be together with colleagues and actually innovation and improvements come from this close contact. It's very difficult to do that through through teleconferences like this one, but it gives ideas, but working together in the same place is I think is essential. What will happen is that people will not be bound by the same rigid schedule. Therefore, peak hours are going to be smoothened or eventually disappear. So people will go different days, I don't know, they're going to arrange themselves to meet in specific days, whatever. So that will be, this flexibility is going to reduce let's say the pressure on public transport, in particular on the peak hours. But on the other hand, we're going to have a kind of diffuse and constant flow of movements. They are, of course, now there is the possibility of reducing the use of cars, and what this person was asking us. we were thinking a lot about, vehicle sharing, things like that. Probably we are going to see this not immediately because people are somehow afraid of contact, but that will disappear in a few months, year maybe, and people will go back to public transport, will go probably back to vehicle sharing. We'll have even maybe some new modes like vehicle sharing with drivers, or in the future with autonomous cars. All these type of things will be. So we are going into a type of mobility that's going to be enormously more complex than in the past. So, but this is related. I wanted to link that with urban the urban plans, or or how the future of cities will be, or the trends towards that. And I believe that one of the key elements of pandemic impact, or the impacts of this pandemic, has been the interest, or even the need of people for space. People have been confined to very small places, and now they long for having space to move around and so on. So this could be obtained in two ways. One is having bigger houses, let's say, with gardens or whatever, or having more public space in front of their apartments or whatever. So I don't think there are many more things on that. So in the first case, we are going towards a renewal of this suburbanization process we had in the past. So people going to live in the outskirts of the main cities. And what would mean is that they will have to, to commute, maybe not in peak hours, but to commute to the centers. The other alternative is to have more public space. And where do we find this? Essentially, in the streets. The streets that are clogged with cars. We might recover some of this place to walk, to ride bicycles, to whatever, and so on. But what happens in both in these cases? In the first case, if we go into a suburban city again, we will need some movements that are not going to be radial like that, but going to be probably more periphery to periphery or whatever, and will require probably additional infrastructure. Will be difficult to manage, or if in the case, especially in the case that also jobs move to the periphery. If not, they will have to be given a very strong or very public transport service to go from the outskirts to the city center. So in any case, both things require important investments. And that's the point. So we have to improve very much our heavy transport system, metro, rail, whatever in particular, and improve the connectivity, multimodality, all these services to make these people who want to live outside to come to the city center for work, if the work is there. If the work is not there, because we are taking a lot of space for this, and life is from cars and so on, and it's difficult to get to the center. The activity in these city centers is going to be reduced, will be not so attractive. Taxes are going to go down. It's going to be probably a decay of the city centers. So how can we combine these two things? So we are, I don't know, for me, it's kind of a challenge, very important challenge.
Mateu, and what about long distance travel? What is your forecast for the future of long distance travel?
For long distance, it is going to be quite, I would say, quite affected, in particular regarding business travel. So I think that a lot of business that was requiring the presence of professionals or businessmen or whatever in different places will be replaced by conference or things like that. However, again, as we said, for teleworking and so on, these, businessmen and, and professionals need to get together, So I think that, fairs, conferences, these type of things are going to be to be not even more important than in the past. So this is a very good news for Barcelona. It's a fair city, or for Hanover, but I think this is going to be somehow the replacement of a lot of this trouble that was going on and so on. So people will take advantage of these meetings to do business. So it means that, for example, this will have big impacts in air transport. Businessmen or business travel was covering a lot of the of the costs of airlines. Now, if they have to be replaced by leisure trips, the fares. The airfares might go up to even to 50% for the economy class, to replace the other one and so on. So it's going to be also a remake of these airfares. I think that leisure trips are going to increase enormously in the future, as soon as people are now eager to travel. There is a natural let's say anthropological need to move for people. Cesare Marchetti has been dealing with that for a long time. These patterns of mobility for people. People have once a year they have to move somewhere to do something. It comes from the old ways of herdings and so on. And I think this is going to happen. Only around, I think it's 4% of the world population has ever been abroad or something like that. So it's, the potential demand for these long distance leisure trips is going to increase with economic development. That's for sure. So what the point is to see, how this is going to happen and how they are going to affect, at the end of the day, how are going to affect the climate emergency or things like that. So the point is this phenomenon, which is due, we are seeing that, I think that's a point. So we are observing now that the car in more developed societies has been left aside as the main consumer gadget or main consumer good. And this is going to be replaced by these leisure trips. I think this is going to be the main consumer good of the future. So, and now how are we going to cope with the externalities of these things? And the only way is to making them pay for these externalities. Now this is the airlines that they get very nervous about that, but they'll have to pay for that, and they'll have to keep changing and maybe go into hydrogen, other types of propulsion.
I see. Mateu, let me ask you our favorite question in Rebalance, which is anthropological and philosophical. It's about our perception of time, the value of time we give in this society. I know you wrote your doctoral thesis on the value of time 40 years ago, maybe. So you have a very good perspective on how time and saving time and speed is important in our society, and how this perception is changing. Pandemics has been very influential in the change of the value of time in our society. In which sense?
I think that, okay.
Not an easy question.
Going into
you know too much. You have been thinking too much on the subject.
Yeah, exactly. Going into a little bit into the philosophy of it. So, what is time? And how do we value time? And this goes in parallel with another question that the pandemic has put on the table very clearly: is how do we value life? So, because at the end of the day, when we try to quantify these aspects, we need to put some values on things, value of time and also value of life. Otherwise, we cannot value, for example, safety measures or things like that. So now, people tend to say, oh, the value of life is infinite or things like that, but we cannot do that. As a society, we need to be more consistent, and we have to try to find ways of quantifying things. Now, the doctors in the pandemic, they have been confronted to this. Until now, they say, no, we have to save lives and so on. But then now, like probably all doctors during the wars or whatever, they have been confronted to very difficult issues, like saying, okay, do I save the life of this guy or this lady, or who's old and whatever, or this young one, and so on and so on. Who is the one I am going to put in the intensive care, and so on and so on. So they have to, those are things that they were not really confronted with in the past, and now they are confronted with. So here is a bit my point, that we have to be aware of that, and we have to relate. At the end of the day, we have to relate life, time, and then in this case, the health policies have to be aligned with the transport policies. This is something we have only been developing the past few years, but it is extremely relevant, and we don't have still the solution. So what is the value of for example, pollution? It has been studied for a long time and given value. Finally, we have some values for pollution, but then we realize that these values are now, when they are studied in a little bit deeper, like very well these studies, we find things that are quite astonishing. For instance, that the noise, which we never consider very much actually, noise probably is more important for health than even some types of air pollution that apparently were very important, because they create stress, and this stress creates ictus and whatever, and so on and so on. Oh, that's an important thing. Another one is that the most important thing for public transport, for promoting public transport, is that it makes people walk. So in our models in the past, we were considering that walking time to access to the stops or whatever was really, bad, and we penalized it about 3 times the time spent in the vehicle, and suddenly we say, no, this is very good for people. So that's something that is very relevant for in our models, and it shows also a main difficulty of our models, because we have 2 approaches to time, to the value of time. One is for demand forecasts, let's say, okay, how do people react to a situation when they have some, travel time, some costs, some whatever, and so on, and why they choose one thing or the other, and whatever. So, and this indicates a willingness to pay for this time. So, and when we thought about this cost of walking, we put this. Apparently, people didn't want to walk, so that's why we put that in the model. But then we have the other view is that the value of travel time for society in terms of resources, and is what we put into our evaluations. And then we say, no, what, for society it's very good that people walk. So, which type of value are we going to use in our evaluations? This willingness to pay, which means that people do not want to walk, or what we consider for society, which is good for the health of people. You see, so these 2 different approaches to travel time, we have to deal with them, and we have to try something that allows us to find a good way. But eventually to use that was even at the time in 79, my dissertation, that was the need for a social value of time. So you have a willingness to pay, which is a kind of a behavioral type value of time, and then you have something that is for society, and then you have to take this social value of time, kind of a shadow value. in any case, what I want, I finish with that. What is this is a very relevant discussion because the time savings tend to be the main component of the benefits of any project. So if this time saved, but because we with our projects we go faster and we reduce the travel time, which is why we build motorways or high-speed trains or hyperloops or whatever, then we have to, then we have to give, to consider also a proper value. Actually, the point is that we have to probably to switch and to consider a basic value of time, which is related to the value of life, of course, something that is not happening in the guides or whatever about cost-benefit analysis, but we have to also to consider. I'm sorry, I got lost there. So to consider that this value of time, as actually in my dissertation I proposed and I found has a distribution. So for even for a very clear category of users with a rent purpose, etc., they have a distribution of values. It's not, but we are using a single average value of time. So giving, to give to this benefit, which is the main element of all our evaluations, about 70–80% of the total benefits, and we are just doing kind of a single average value of time, is not, I mean, we have to review that, revise this. It's not possible that to be so simple in doing that. So, and if you look at the, yeah.
We have a couple of questions on the relation of time working or time using hyperconnections. One by Rafael Fando that says, "Hi, Mateu.
Nice.
Very nice to see and listen to you again." Then what do you think, he asked you, about this new planning policy of everything within 15 minutes radius, which curiously we call new planning policy, which is the neighborhood we always knew since we were children. So he says some cities are trying to implement it, and it seems that this idea of two-speed city, where many people are walking or riding bikes and having all the space you mentioned before all around, at the same time hyper-connected. At the same time, they can move fast to an airport and take the plane to a distant or exotic location. So this idea of two-speed cities, do you think this is going to happen? And then how we use the time that these different type of mobility are saving when we are pricing transport in urban cities, in cities? I mean, do you think that the models we had, the mindset of the cost benefit based on saving times, are still useful to appraise transport and mobility policies in such a complex cities of two speeds, combining people that would like to walk, people who like to have high connectivity?
I think that, this, we are going to discuss probably later on about cost benefit analysis and so on, but it is clear that the main, to make decisions, we need to quantify things. That's the point. So to have really to understand what's going on. Huh? So this is why we need to to have proper indicators for this, and cost benefit analysis is going to help us. So we are going to discuss that later on. Now going back to these 15-minute cities, proposed in Paris and maybe Barcelona or whatever. This is, of course, it's very nice as a concept, but it is essentially a political concept. So the reality is that to have that, to have cities like that, we should change completely the distribution of residences and employment. So how can you, that would be fantastic if everybody could just walk to the office, but unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know, but we have concentrated a lot of jobs in specific places. So if we want, office buildings because they are performing better than have little small offices here and there and so on, and which I don't know, we could discuss about that, but it is not so easy to have everybody living around in 15 minutes, in a space of 15 minutes. How do you do that? Especially because our cities have been designed essentially to have a central business district where a lot of things are concentrated. Now, this is okay. You could have an office nearby. Why not? But would you like to have an industry nearby? So that's maybe this could be very interesting. But I was reading today that, for example, in Korea, people are fighting like mad. Neighbors are fighting, like mad because of noise. They are stepping a little bit. They are due to the confinement. Now they feel that they have plenty of noise. So we are not so sensitive to noise as Koreans, but we don't. So everything has positive and negative aspects. It would be very nice to be able to do everything in 15 minutes, but the reality is there. And I would like that Madame Hidalgo tells me how she is going to make these people having their jobs at a 15 minutes walk from their houses. To me, and this is very difficult. In any case, we can, of course, we have to see if the investments related to that make sense or not. Regarding the slow city, which we all appreciate having this going a little bit slower. Maybe we are going to have later on someone who's going to another interviewee who's going to speak about that later on. But we would like to have a lot of space, be able to move around, walking, cycling, whatever. Everything is very nice. But if we have to deal with that, we have to be very conscious of the implications of this. Now, regarding the long distance trips, as I mentioned before, there are going to be plenty of those, probably. Some of them are also business trips are going to be there. I don't know if as I said before, if for example, high-speed trains or this type of national Barcelona-Madrid, we have here a type of trips, what do you call that, air bridge, puente aéreo, are going to be reduced or not. I would guess that they will, and so on. But I'm sorry, something like, okay. Oh, sorry, thank you. But I think this is relevant because many people. I'm sorry about that.
That's cool.
Okay, sorry about that. So I think that this probably this dual type of thing is going to be okay. But we are going to. But the point is that we should be able to have adequate connections between this slow city and the fast city, and this is the key element.
Just the question, Mateo, going back to the appraisal of all of this, do you think that European cities, the center of European cities, at least well-developed cities, have already good transport systems? So the social relevance of transport policies are not to make faster, 5 minutes, 30 seconds, 45 seconds faster the trip, but to increase the quality of the experience of moving, that people may prefer to spend 3, 4, 10 more minutes walking than using a metro line and going underneath every day. So it's not because of the evolution we have in our cities. So we cannot keep in the future evaluating projects in terms of saving time to people, because
Yeah,
maybe the willingness of people to pay for saving a number of seconds is almost zero, and the social value of that is also very limited. Also because people are using mobile phones, people are reading, people are talking, people are so. How we assess transport policies in cities, in European cities.
yeah, that's is related to what I said before about the value of time and using average values. So here we had some very funny examples, huh, about things, kind of investments, saying that because of this investment we are going to reduce a little bit congestion, so vehicles will the millions of vehicles in the city are going to save a few seconds. So if you multiply these millions for the seconds, you get a lot of thousands of hours with and tremendous values and so on, applying the average value. So this is clear that this requires, as I said before, it requires a more thorough analysis of the value of time. That's for sure. What is important is that this actually the value of time in the way we were or the way we're analyzing it in the past was considered that the time traveling was lost. So it was part of this, kind of, as I said, life related type. It's like losing a part of your life. But the reality is that this is the basis, but then regarding to that, there are some other elements that are positive or negative. If you can work during this time, you take advantage of it. So you are wasting less time. Therefore, the waste of resources is lower. If you are uncomfortable, then maybe this time is painful, and then your willingness to pay, of course, will be bigger, and in terms of resources you could consider that this is bigger, and so on. So it is important that we consider this basic value of time, and then what is linked to this and the possibilities. Then as I said at the very beginning, digitization has changed completely the way of doing things. In particular, there are two elements that have had a tremendous importance in transport. One is that you can use your time probably in transport with your mobile phone. You have some time to do things, or communicate, or read, or whatever, or listen to something. That's one. That's obvious. And you have to go to any public transport and you will see what happens. And the other one is that it has provided us with a tremendous amount of information. So now we have the ability, if we are doing it well through these maybe through apps, whatever, and so on, to access what we call mobility as a service. So we can now have the opportunities to decide much more efficiently the best option for our trip. So this information, so digitalization has very important in these two elements, taking advantage of time and reducing, at the end of the day, reducing your resistance to travel. So that's why the old models are not so good. They have to be deeply revised.
Christina Poe is asking you about public transport. It seems that after pandemic, there is a preference to individual mobility, walking, cycling with electric bikes, with cars, with electric cars, but public transport, crowded vehicles seems less attractive. So maybe there are some people that are saying that we have to limit the number of people in a public transport vehicle in peak hour. So do you think public transport will have problems to come back to the levels they had before?
I don't think so. Really, it's going to be a blip. It's going to be. It will take a while. It will take a while to disappear. This reluctance to be, you know, for mass transport, to be with a lot of people, around a lot of people. But you know, once we are convinced that this is. Let's say that this is we are vaccinated or whatever and so on, and there is no particular danger and so on, things will have to go back. In particular, if the restrictions to private vehicles in the cities are maintained, is what we said. So that's a good opportunity probably to, as I said, to increase public space, taking out probably parking space, maybe, you know, rearranging the traffic. As you may know, we have been discussing also in a PhD that we recently presented here, is the possibility of applying a toll for in Barcelona, in concrete, that was for Barcelona, a dynamic toll. So you pay for the use of some streets, let's say, or in the city that will be more dedicated to the basic network dedicated to, you know, to people who want to run faster, which is good. I mean, if our city doesn't allow people to move easily and quickly and so on, to those ready, who have a high willingness to pay, ready to pay for that, that's going to be let's say, not attractive to many of those people who have a high value of time and who, we want to attract also to our cities. You know, we want to have people who are businessmen, innovators, people and so on, people who value very much their time and they want to move quickly and so on.
But public transport, Alain Bonafou asks you now, if you don't think that public transport is going to face a huge funding crisis in the coming 5-10 years, a huge funding crisis. So maybe this road pricing, kind of road pricing policy you are thinking on may help to finance public transport.
That's right. That's what, you know, in these two models we were discussing before, this kind of suburbanization, more cars moving around in the periphery, and then making them pay. That would be okay. This infrastructure needed for that will be possibly paid by the users. But the other model that's having, okay, we have more people living in the outskirts, but having to go to the city, and we need this heavy infrastructure to connect them to the city center, because public transport, we have not found at least the solution for, you know, to make people pay for it. So that these investments are going to be very big and not going to be paid by the users. So either we have I don't know, we pay it through taxation, which is okay, we start getting into a kind of redistribution between the cities and rural areas and so on. So okay, we can discuss about that also, but it's going to be very difficult. And not a good way to do that is to make, you know, people using the cars in this basic network faster a bit and so on, to pay for that. And we have analyzed this, studied it and so on, and frankly, the amounts that could be recovered from these urban tolls for private vehicles or for they could compensate quite a lot at least the operating cost of public transport. So my point here is that the financial aspects have to be taken into account since the very beginning. We cannot design a mobility plan without thinking about who's going to pay for that. And in the present circumstances where we have these tremendous deficits that are going to be increased even by the pandemic, so this is a even more relevant question.
Let me ask now about European transport policy, because you wrote a book, Going Trans-European, in 1999 in your Sabbatica. I don't remember if it was at Oxford or in Cambridge.
Oxford, yeah.
Oxford. I always make the mistake. So in my reading, it was a very optimistic, at least an optimistic view of the European project, as political project, as well as in the common transport policy, especially in relation to the trans-European transport networks. Many things have changed in the last 20 years. What is your perception on the
Yeah,
European transport policies and the European project nowadays?
yeah. As you know, I am a radical optimist, but in this case, I was. I mean, I was optimistic in the sense that this policy was interesting, but the concept was having European networks, So, but then the politics have really changed this view, and they first passed into priority projects that were it's a funny story about that, priority projects, and then they went into corridors. Now we are in the corridors, priority corridors and so on, which is better than projects, but still very far from this concept of integrating the whole of Europe. So that's one thing that probably there is not enough money for that, and the countries do not want to lose their control about what they do, and so on and so on. So we see that some of these corridors are not advancing very much. So and they have not complied with any of the deadlines that they were proposed. But they are also, because this is related also to other European principles that they have not been able to put in place, like this polluter pay, user pay, polluter pay principles, and so on and so on. And so we have a very distorted markets. So we mentioned before the airlines, they don't pay taxes on kerosene. Okay, there are reasons for that, but this is, doesn't make much sense. We are also having a kind of a very probably a political influence in the development of infrastructure, in particular regarding airports and ports. And we are saying that they have to do some redistribution of the infrastructures when they do not follow any concept that would be acceptable. So we could discuss about that later on. But I would say that we are one of the key points, and I finish with that in this, this, that the European Commission has been pushing so much for so many years rail transport without having the capacity to have an influence on the real management of this. They separated infrastructure and operation, but that has not really flown, and we see that in many countries, in France also, in Spain is a bit separated, but all of them end up being a little bit the same thing. So they have not been able to introduce competition. The management of the rail system continues to be in general a disaster everywhere. And now we see the last, this opening of the market is essentially allowing national companies from one state of the union to go into another state, so which doesn't make any sense, So if you have a nationalized company, it's because you need that in your nation or your country or whatever, So why should you go elsewhere? And maybe especially if in your own country you generate tremendous deficits. So the taxpayers of one country have to pay for this company to go to another country to do. The whole thing is very bad. So and railways, they have a clear niche in the transport market. Maybe we can discuss about. Of course, we mentioned before for urban, suburban, whatever, some types of regional transport, especially going to the big cities where you don't have the possibility of other alternatives. But in long distance, high-speed trains, they have a very, very thin market in places where there is a lot of demand, or in rail and freight transport, there is also a market where you have a big concentration of demand, like in main ports, in some terminals and whatever, main industries. Very few, very few. But instead of concentrating on these things and so on, they want to replace trucks. And in the future, we didn't speak very much about technology, but electric or hydrogen or whatever trucks and autonomous with self-driving trucks and so on are going to be there very often. So they will have possibly plenty of capacity in the existing motorways. Maybe you need to make additional infrastructure, but so. And they are probably much more adapted to the type of demand, e-commerce, whatever that we have than railways. So now, but they keep talking about, the railways are going to be the center of the world.
Yeah.
I think, this is misguided, and instead they should concentrate on that. But the Commission is really guilty of this. I think I don't know if this is following the lobbies or whatever, but I have seen that since I joined the bank in 88, this kind of push towards railways, but they are, going down all the time. So, I mean, why are you betting on something that is not performing?
So Mateu, great talk. We are just about. Let me ask our last question. We know that you believe that project appraisal methodology requires a profound revision, because actually appraisal methodology is not technocratic, should not be a technocratic activity. Is a way to produce an objective measure of the public interest, like our all French engineers try to do in the beginning of the 19th century. So we are still trying to measure the public interest. So how good is a given transport regulation or investment for the public in general? So also I remember you once told a number of people that you feel like a priest, that after so many years being a good priest, then you doubt about God, if God exists or not. But still you remain attached to the ethics and to the values. Doesn't matter if God, the truth exists, still the practicing the ethics of the priest remains valid. So what is your conclusion on this?
So
what do you think right now in relation to project appraisal?
I've been doing a lot of these evaluations over the years and so on. And as I said, I was trying to get a value of time. That was my thesis, a value of time to be used in this evaluation. What I have observed, however, is that instead of understanding that this is the cost-benefit analysis is just a tool to understand better the project, to establish the relationships between the different elements and so on. So how important is this thing in relation to the other one, and so on and so on. So and to be convinced that this project is good. It has been taken as a kind of bureaucratic exercise where, if the final number you get from your calculations is above 3% or 5% or whatever, then the project is good. If it is below, and this, I have been fighting with this since I joined the European Investment Bank, because they were saying, oh, but, what is this 3%? And then you were having people saying, oh, but if you change a bit this, then instead of 2.9, it's going to be 3.1, and then the project is going to be good, This is the type of things that happen. No, this is exactly, as I said, cost-benefit analysis and gives you this relationship, allows you to understand, to quantify, and then to see if a project is really good or really bad, And then, in these cases, you are, yeah, great, this is great. But the problem is when you are in this middle ground, and then and then the model helps you to see that, if it is really, the risks are really there or not. And if you can, be satisfied, and you think that all these unknowns about, the demand forecasts, the value of time, the value of life, and so on, which you have introduced there, if all these things matches and gives you confidence that the project is good enough. So this is the issue. Then regarding decision making, that again, we tend to say, if it is, if cost benefit analysis gives a good level, the project is efficient, and then therefore is good. So this again is something that I have been trying to put a big question mark on this, because the reality, the decision making is made based on other things, in particular in redistribution effects. Actually, European policy, regional policy, is based on that. They say, okay, we are going to do this project because it's good for this, let's say, region requiring regional development and whatever. So it means that you are creating a bias in favor of that. So these objectives, these policies introduce a bias. So what you have to do is also to understand, how this project is having impacts on different stakeholders, including, different players, operators, users, whatever, and so on, but also administrations, how this affect national administration, regional, local administrations, and so on, and see who pays for what, and so on. So now when we're talking about paying and getting the benefits, what is important also is to look at the financial aspects of it. And as before we mentioned that the need maybe to, to have tolls or to pay or whatever. So these financial elements are essential to have sustainable projects that are going to, that are not going to be stopped because of monetary problems. That's one thing. And to understand who's going to pay for what are the taxes, who's going to pay the taxes and who's going to receive, and all these type of things that are very important, and that are very often the key element in decision making. So instead of saying, oh, but this is paid by Europe, that's, okay, good. No, but you have to understand that maybe it is paid, 50% is paid by Europe as a subsidy, but you still have to pay forever about the operation of this infrastructure. And you have to be convinced that this is good for you, and so on. So these type of things are hardly taken into account, not to talk about externalities and the impacts, the long-term impacts of these projects, of these financial mechanisms, which can be sometimes terrible for the future generations. I wanted to finish with this. So we have been spending the money of our children, our grandchildren, for years and years and years. Now the public debt is enormous, so someone will have to pay for that. So it seems that we are very happy with that. So when we design a project, we have to understand how it's going to be paid by users, by taxpayers over the years, and so on and so on. But otherwise, we are contributing to this what we call intergenerational redistribution and bad effects for the future. The young people now seems to be very worried about climate change and so on, which is fantastic. I absolutely, go along with them. But they should also be very, very well aware that today's expenditures can affect them in the future very much. So it's not only, some direct effects on the planet, but also on who's going to pay for what.
Okay, thank you very much, Mateu. Has been a pleasure to discuss so many things to you in 1 hour. Really,
Yes,
really
too many.
No, really cool, really cool. Just to the people listening to us, I cannot resist to tell them that you are as well an artist, not just an engineer. And then you have a lovely piece of art in the wall, white one, that looks very much like REBALANCE logo, but we did not copy from you the logo. This is only I want to clarify, because it looks very much the same, but we did not copy your design.
Those are two Moebius bands
Yes.
You know, made in alabaster. It took me a long time to do that, and it's very delicate.
Yes, it's beautiful, beautiful. Looks like the Rebalance logo. So we have a similar taste.
Yeah, okay, you can use that. Maybe, but you pay my.
Yes, yes. This is what I want to clarify. Thank you very much, and thank you all of you. Moltes gràcies, Mateu.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot to everybody, to my listeners too, and my friends around.
Vinga, gràcies. Adéu-siau.